The opinions and suggestions expressed on the following program are solely those of the participants and are not necessarily endorsed by KRMG, Cox Media Group Incorporated, or the program sponsors. This following program is sponsored by Causeway, LLC. Information in this broadcast is not intended as an investment, tax, or financial advice. Matthew Moore is not a licensed investment advisor and speaks solely from his experience and opinions. All information in this broadcast is for entertainment or educational purposes only. Matthew Moore, Causeway, LLC, and Cox Media Group Tulsa are not responsible for the success or failure of any person's investment decisions or purchases. Matthew Moore, Causeway, LLC, and Cox Media Group Tulsa makes no and expressly disclaims all representations, warranties, and guarantees with respect to this broadcast and its sponsors. Investing in any market is inherently risky and can be financially dangerous. Invest at your own risk. Gather knowledge in the world of cryptocurrency right now on 102.3 KRMG, Tulsa's news and talk. Welcome to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. Matthew is locally based right here in Tulsa. Questions, comments, concerns? Call 918-460-5764 or send us an open mic using the KRMG app. Now, here's Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore.
And good Sunday evening to you. My name is Russell Mills. Thank you very much for joining us for Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. You know, if you're going to build a rocket ship and fly to the moon, you might want to learn about the basics of flight here on the planet Earth first. If you're going to get involved in cryptocurrencies and the wave of the future, you might need to take a look back to see how we got where we are today. And that is sort of the topic. And I'm sure we'll diverge as we always do, but that is what we're going to talk about today. Let's start by introducing our host. He is the guy they named the show after, Matthew J. Moore. Hey, Matt.
Hey, thanks, Russell. You know, it is always a pleasure and an honor to be in the studio with you guys every Sunday. And I just want to say welcome back, T-Town, and welcome back, world, because, yes, we do have people from all around the world that do listen to this program. We are here again. Guess what? To bring you those stimulating conversations that you expect every single time about Bitcoin and how it relates to the world around us. This is one of America's only radio shows dedicated to Bitcoin and the topic of cryptocurrencies. And every Sunday, we bring you content that just might tickle your brain. But, you know, because, you know, we're always asking questions, you know, you never think to ask certain questions, and we want to provoke those questions. So maybe we'll tickle your brain today. But today, you know, like I said, it's not going to be any different. But have you ever, you know, here's a question I want to propose to you. If you're listening to this program, have you ever taken an economics class? Was it maybe boring or maybe even confusing? Was there contradictions in some of the theories that you maybe heard? Well, today I want to present to you a type of economics that is less about formulas, charts, and graphs, and more about common sense and human nature. There are different schools of thought when it comes to economics, and the one that I subscribe to is Austrian economics. And to help me navigate this dynamic conversation today is none other than my exceptional co-host, Eric Cooper.
Matthew, how are you doing?
Man, you know, like I said, this is a high for me every time I'm here.
Yeah, you know, it's also a high temperature outside. And so if you guys are listening, once again, from the garage, in the car, or whatever, stay inside. That's just what we need to do. But today is July 17th. It's a great day for me because I have my cousin Brent's birthday, my stepfather, and then my brother-in-law. It's all of their birthdays today. And
wow.
Like Facebook has like 33 other people on July 17th. So
I'm
that's
assuming
awesome.
You're buying everybody a gift, right?
Yes, it's in the mail. It's in the mail. So, Matt, but July 17th is a big day because we're giving away $200 worth of Bitcoin. We've been talking about this for a few weeks, and we are in the final hour, right, where folks can qualify. So, again, Matthew, tell them how they qualify.
Right. Yeah, it is the 17th. And yes, Eric, it is. So after this show, I actually plan to draw a lucky winner thanks to our show sponsor, Hedge, which we will talk about them a little bit coming up. But just so you know, you can go to my website and stay tuned for the second segment to find out how you can qualify. We'll give the details then, so you definitely want to stick around.
Yes, sir. And today I'm really excited to chat with our special guest because his name is Per Bylund, and he's an author, associate professor at Oklahoma State University, and a senior fellow at the, and I always mess this, Mises Institute. I always get it wrong. But because this might be a deep subject, I'm going to say let's go ahead and get it kicked off and bring on our special guest, Per. Welcome to the studio, and just tell everybody hello and a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much. So I'm just an ordinary Swede, born and raised in Sweden, where I started a career in systems development, then transitioned into politics, which led me to an economics PhD at the University of Missouri, and now I'm a professor of entrepreneurship. It's pretty obvious.
That is awesome. Well, I actually ran into Per. I was actually a student going through the Fears Fellowship program. And when I heard him start talking about economics, I just lit up. I got excited because I was like, man, this guy gets it. I was like, he comes from it at a lot of times this Austrian perspective. But Per, can you explain to us why you're so fascinated with, this type of economics? Why Austrian economics?
Well, let me tell you, it's not that you get very inspired by economics in grad school, for sure. But what you do get inspired of, or what I got inspired by, is Austrian economics and how that explains how people actually act and the market as a process, the dynamics of it all. So if you recall from college, take an economics course, it's all about equilibrium. It's all stable, it's all static, there's no change going on. For Austrian economists, the entrepreneur is at the center. And all the change that is happening is explained in Austrian economics.
Okay.
So, for our listeners, a lot of people haven't heard of Austrian economics. And it's not the good day, mate, or shrimp on the barbie. That's Australian. It's Austrian, even though, anyway, that's a different subject. So in the universities, they do more of the Keynesian approach. So can you kind of explain the difference right there for just the average listener?
Yeah, there's a huge difference. So Keynesian economics is based on aggregate demand and all this aggregate statistical constructs and how they relate to each other. For Austrian economics, it's really about the people, real people, how they interact and trade with each other, and then how we get these economic phenomena that we can observe, which sort of arise out of how we interact with each other. So it's completely different in how these schools approach the economy and what they're looking at.
So with that in mind, we're going to turn and relate this to Bitcoin here in a few, but do you feel that one school of thought is more superior to the other, or do they work together? Are they complementary? Can you explain maybe why or why not?
Well, they do not work together. So Keynesian economics was really started as a critique of economics and a way to facilitate policy and policymakers' wishes and dreams, whereas Austrian economics is trying to explain the economy the way it works and the real economy, if you will, and not just models and made up constructs and how they relate to each other. So obviously Austrian economics is much more real world economics.
Interesting. So, okay, so let me ask you this. You got Mises, you got Hayek, and now we've got Per Bylund here. Well, hopefully we can put you in the ranks of those guys. But yeah, let me ask you this. Out of all of the Austrian economics that you've read, who is your favorite author and why?
Well, that's sort of a hard question to answer. I mean, there are two that are really magnificent. It's the school's founder, Karl Menger, in 1871, and there's Mises, who wrote a lot on different subjects. But the funny thing with Austrian economics is that you can read the first treatise. Anyone can do it. You don't need prior economics. You can still understand it, and you can understand what he's doing in there.
Right. Well, and you have obviously a background and experience in this, and you get invited to speak often on this. I actually saw some guy on Twitter. He was saying that you are like one of the top voices right now in Austrian economics. Is that true, or is he elaborating?
I don't think that is true. There are plenty of Austrians out there. I mean, I'm pretty vocal on Twitter, but
right.
That's
now,
about it.
Usually when people like myself need to kind of understand the Keynesian and the Austrian, do you have any videos or YouTube clips or anything like that you suggest people go look at if they want to kind of see the difference between the two?
Well, I would look at all kinds of discussions with Bob Murphy.
Okay.
He is sort of a macroeconomist looking at the big flows and the big aggregates, but from an Austrian perspective, and he has critiqued the Keynesians as well. I mean, since I do entrepreneurship, I'm much more micro, looking at the much lower level.
Oh, okay. So you are focusing more on the micro instead of the macro, and is that because you are more fascinated with it, or are you fascinated by the macro as well?
Well, as an economist, you can't really pick one over the other, but as a researcher, you have to pick one.
Right.
And entrepreneurship to me is really fascinating because that's where value comes from. It's how you create value at all. And the way I would like to put it is that entrepreneurs create our tomorrow.
Right.
And that's super fascinating. And from that comes everything else.
Right.
And I mean, you can study money and things like that too. And that's also very fascinating. But to me, it's the creation of value and where our prosperity comes from that is really fascinating.
Right. Now, those very good points. And, when we come back, we are going to have more with Per Bylund. On segment 2, we'll dive in on how all of these economic theories relate to Bitcoin and why maybe we should care. And don't forget, we're also going to share about how you can win that $200 of Bitcoin. Stay put. You don't want to miss this. We're going to connect the dots. I know when you might hear the word economics, it might scare you, but I promise you we won't. So we'll be right back.
All right, we're going to take a quick time out. Stay with us, and we'll get a little deeper into all that, but then we'll talk about how all of this applies to the world of cryptocurrencies, and specifically Bitcoin. You are listening to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore on 102.3 KRMG, Tulsa's News and Talk. Welcome back to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. We are live and local in the big city of Tulsa on a steamy Sunday, and it is going to be hot this week. Do take good care out there. We have been talking about a little bit of economic theory, and if that sounds scary, actually, our guest is doing a great job of explaining it. I'm even understanding it, and I can barely do math, so I'm sure this guy this is his wheelhouse. Our host, Matthew J. Moore. Hey, bud.
Russell, you actually bring up a really good point. And that is, in school, I was a horrible math student. And for somebody like me to take a liking to cryptocurrencies, monetary policy, economics, and I attribute that to kind of the philosophical nature of Austrian economics that kind of allowed me to become excited about it.
Well,
right?
For those just joining us, the way our guest, and you can introduce our guest back in a second, the way I understood what he was saying is, Keynesian economics is like a sort of a scientific, methodical, mathematical approach to macroeconomics and understanding how things are moving. The Austrian school looks more at human nature.
Right.
Why do people buy the things they do? Why are they, why does this trend work and that one didn't? And so it's more of an, a cultural and anthropological approach, sort of. Am I getting that right?
Dynamic, yeah, it's more dynamic.
He's kind of nodding. He said, yeah, whatever, shut up.
Maybe.
I'm sure
These guys
I'm
don't
sure
know
I'm
what they're talking
oversimplifying,
about,
right?
I don't know. Well, our guest, Per Bylund, he is with us here in studio, and we'll do a proper introduction here. But is that maybe an accurate 30,000-foot view? Is that why I like Austrian economics more? Is it because it's more philosophical in nature?
It is definitely more philosophical, and it starts with the philosophy because the whole theory is sort of deductive from one point stating what action actually is. And from there, the whole theory is sort of deduced.
Right.
Whereas Keynesian economics starts with math and statistics.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that Austrian economics is necessarily anthropological. But
it's talking about human nature and why humans do what they do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and it's about how people act and interact and why they do it and so forth. So you're right there, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and Eric, my co-host, is in studio with us as well. And if you're listening to this show and you're like, you know what, I was listening to the first segment, I've listened to past shows. This is really cool stuff. Eric, can you share with people how they can listen to our past episodes?
100%. So anywhere that you can do your podcasting, we've got it. Google Podcast, KRMG, On Demand, Spotify, Apple. You can even go to YouTube, and we put these bad boys on YouTube. And again, we are on episode 54, so there are 52 right now that you can go listen to. One missing, and then this one will be up tonight.
There you go.
Yeah, and if you were curious about how we actually keep this forward-thinking program on the air, it's because of our great sponsors. Eric, can you actually give our show sponsor for this segment a shout-out? And let's let everybody know how they can actually win $200 of Bitcoin.
100%. This segment is brought to you by a company called Hedge. Do you have a strategy to obtain cryptocurrency on a regular basis? Do you plan to automate your dollar cost averaging? What about getting all or even part of your paycheck in crypto? Hedge is revolutionizing how you get paid. Hedge makes it easy to automatically convert your pay into crypto. Whether you're an employer or employee, you can get started in 4 easy steps. Start getting paid in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin. Crypto is a long-term play. You need to start your strategy today. Hedge will make it easy for you to stack them sats month after month. What are you waiting for? Start living your life on the Hedge. Check them out at gethedge.io. Once again, gethedge.io.
Yes, and if you're curious, sats stand for Satoshi, which is the smaller unit of a Bitcoin. So if you didn't know that, you learned something new. And here, guess what? This is how you can actually qualify for the $200 worth of Bitcoin. And keep in mind, today, during this show, is actually the last hour you can qualify. So if you go to my website, mattjmoore.com, and scroll down to the resource section, you'll see a button that says Get Hedge. Click that, go ahead, and sign up for Hedge and start having a portion of your paycheck allocated into Bitcoin. It can be as little or as much as you want. Using Hedge, you can actually skip the exchange experience, which is actually a plus, and you can have your cryptocurrency sent to any self-custody wallet that you control. And once you sign up and start using Hedge, Hedge will actually give me this list of emails from those who've signed up and have actually started using it. And today, I will draw that winner, and we'll find out who wins that $200 worth of Bitcoin. It's going to be that easy. So don't forget, go to my website, mattjmoore.com, scroll down to the resource section, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And if you got questions, you can always send me a message.
And if you're listening to this show tomorrow or beyond, sorry, you missed out. But if you're listening today, you can still make it happen. Matt, we've got some ground cover on this show today, so we're going to pick up our conversation. Our special guest is Per Bylund, and it is PER space Bylund. He's an author, associate professor at Oklahoma State, and a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. Per, again, thank you for coming in and talking with us about Austrian and Keynesian economics.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, and Per, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. This, this comes from F.A. Hayek, and this kind of relates. We're going to start tying this into Bitcoin. So in 1984, the legendary Austrian economist F.A. Hayek made the following statements in an interview. He basically states that all governments have stopped any further development of money, and you are not allowed as an individual to experiment on it. Money has been improved, or hasn't been improved. Money has rather become worse in the course of time. Governments said it must not develop any further, and what we've had since in development are matters of government interventions or inventions, mostly wrong, mostly abuses of money. And he basically is stating that he has come to this position of asking, has monetary policy ever done any good? And he states, I don't think it has. I think it has done only harm, and that's why I am now pleading for what I call denationalization of money. And I don't believe that we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government, because we can't take it violently out of the hands of the government. All we can do is by some sly or roundabout way introduce something that they can't stop. So after reading that, to me it seems like Hayek was some kind of a prophet here. His statements seem to be indicating this idea of separation of state and money, and it sounds very familiar, like Bitcoin, right? All the attributes. Yeah, it's very Satoshi Nakamoto, very sly, roundabout way. So Per, what are your thoughts on that? Is that how do you feel that relates to Bitcoin?
I think it does relate to Bitcoin. I mean, Hayek was open for all kinds of different types of money being invented and being evolved and being developed and competing with each other. I mean, that's the whole point, letting people choose whatever money they like. And Bitcoin could be one of those options. Right. It could also be gold. It could be some other crypto. It could be whatever you want, right? But when the state nationalizes money, you have only one. Right. And it even has a law saying that you have to accept this to pay all kinds of debts. Right. It doesn't matter how crappy the currency is, right? You still have to use it. Right.
Yeah. Well, and you could almost argue today that in the United States, you have two forms of money that are being used: the constitutional version, which is gold and silver, and then you've got the Federal Reserve notes, which is a liability or a credit, basically issued out of thin air. So I find this whole topic of money, the evolution of money, how it relates to monetary policy, very, very fascinating. And I think one of the reasons why Hayek's ideas are so powerful is because it not only allows money creation to be decentralized, but innovative and competitive, but also eliminates the monopoly of money creation, which can create a Cantillon effect. This effect often results in those closest to the money printers getting the newly created money first, before it actually devalues, creating a wealth gap. So, Russell, how many more minutes do we got?
We got about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, well, this is going to be a loaded question, so I'm actually going to hold off on asking this one. But when we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit about more of this with Per Bylund. Don't want to miss it. It's going to be maybe some new ideas or a thought process you're unfamiliar with.
All right, we'll take a quick time out, get you caught up on the news, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore on KRMG. Welcome back to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. I'm Russell Mills. Thank you very much for tuning in this evening. We sure do appreciate it. Don't forget, as mentioned earlier, if you ever missed an episode, we got you covered. Just hit the on-demand section on krmg.com or the KRMG app. You'll also find this show on YouTube, Spotify, just about anywhere where you can find a podcast. Please welcome back our host, Matthew J. Moore. Hey, Matt.
Hey, thank you, Russell. Yeah, that last segment smoked by, went really fast. So we're again just getting carried away with awesome conversations about how Austrian economics or economics in general relate to things like Bitcoin or monetary policy. And to help me navigate this conversation is my co-host, Eric Cooper. Eric, you ready to hit this one hard?
Yep, it's hot outside.
Okay. Well, today, if you haven't been listening to this program, we do have a special guest in studio, and his name is Per Bylund. And he is an associate professor at Oklahoma State University and is a senior fellow at the Mises Institute, and I might say a fan of Austrian economics. So we, before we, when we left for break, we were talking about the differences between these two different thought processes in economics, whether it be Keynesian or Austrian, how it starts to relate to Bitcoin. And I before we went to break, I had mentioned a statement or a quote from F.A. Hayek, which is a very prominent economist, and or Austrian economist, I should say. And I believe that quote was actually iterated or spoken in the 1970s or 80s, if I remember watching that clip again, or that video. And what I found fascinating he essentially was calling for this denationalization of money, or you could essentially say the separation of state and money. And I had mentioned one of the reasons why I felt like it was kind of so compelling was that, and so innovative, is it allows for this, money itself, the creation of it, to be decentralized, innovative, competitive, kind of lets the cream rise to the top, and it's a free market approach to how money is determined, which can be kind of foreign to some people's thought processes. But one of the reasons why I really get upset with, the way the current system is now, a lot of people will talk about wealth inequality or the wealth gap, but when you've got an elite group of people that get to decide, what interest rates are set at and how much money is in the system, those who are usually closest to the money printers get that money first before it loses value. They buy assets with it. And so really there's this, select group of people. I mean, especially during the Great Recession when we had all that go on and, they printed billions of dollars, I was thinking, okay, well, when's this inflation going to hit? Well, what we saw were, asset prices went up. But I think a lot of the people who benefited from that money creation were the people closest to the top or closest to the money printers. So my question to you, Per, is this. This could be equated or referred to as a Cantillon effect. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Does this distort the incentive structure of an economy?
Yeah, well, of course it does. I mean, an economy is based on prices and the signals that prices give everybody. I mean, something is cheap or something is expensive, and you compare between different things. I mean, a Cantillon effect is basically when prices have adjusted to the money supply, the number of dollars in circulation, and then you add more money and it ends up in one sector. I mean, whoever gets this new money is suddenly very rich compared to everybody else.
Right.
But the prices have not adjusted yet. So, of course, it changes the incentives. And whoever they spend the money on, they get more income than everybody else, and then they can turn around and buy more stuff. So
Right.
so some people are benefiting, and whoever gets the money last, they lose because
Right.
they have to pay these new higher prices
Right.
with incomes that are in the previous price level, in a sense, right? They they usually have fixed income and things like that, so they don't get these increases when this new money hits the economy, so they have to pay higher prices with a lower salary.
Right.
So with Bitcoin's mining mechanism, the decentralized nature, limited supply, how do you think Bitcoin relates to the Austrian school of thought?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is more of a stable money or sound money in the Austrian school. So it's not a fiat currency like the dollar where whoever owns the dollar, the U.S. government, they can print as many as they like and spend on whatever they like and just create new ones. Whereas Bitcoin, you cannot. Right. So it works more like the gold standard in a sense. So Austrian economics, I mean, as a body of theory, it can explain how it works and what effect it has on the economy. And Bitcoin is while the technology is new, the idea of having a money with a sort of stable supply is not new. Right. We know a lot about how that works.
So you've been watching Bitcoin for quite a long time, right here, and you've watched a little bit about the evolution. Where do you think it's going, and then do you think it's going to become a prominent form of money
for a digital age?
Well, I mean, we'll see. I don't really want to make any predictions because if you make a prediction, you're going to be wrong, right? So I can't really tell, but what I usually say is that Bitcoin is very advanced and mature in terms of technology. I mean, the ledgers and the blockchain and everything like that. But what is missing is really the innovation of it and making it valuable for people to use. A lot of people have a lot of hesitance, at least, maybe resistance to use it because they don't understand how to use it and it's hard. And if Bitcoin can overcome that, I mean, then there's no reason why people wouldn't adopt it much more broadly.
So let me ask you this related to that. We've mentioned and talked about this on the program a couple times. I think one of the biggest criticisms about Bitcoin, besides the speculative investors and the day traders treating it like a speculative tech stock instead of a store of value or a asset limited in supply to hedge itself against inflation. I mean, there's obviously this core group of people who believe that and understand the sound money principles. But yes, the transaction, the ability to spend your Bitcoin in certain locations is often criticized. And there's this idea out there that when something is becoming a form of money, it often goes through these stages, which is first you've got a store of value, then you have I'm blanking on this. You have store of value, you have medium of exchange, you have unit of
account.
That's essentially there's this evolutionary process. I have to refresh my memory on the actual process. But the argument is that Bitcoin first needs to become a prominent store of value before people start spending it. And then once they start spending it, then it'll become a measure of wealth. Is that reasonable to assume, and it just hasn't gotten there yet?
Well, I mean, in a sense, money is defined as the commonly used medium of exchange, and Bitcoin is not common unless you in certain groups. Right. So in that sense, it's not a money yet, but it could become one. That's totally possible.
Right.
I mean, I'm not really a proponent of seeing money in terms of it has to have these types of qualities.
Right.
I mean, it makes it easier, but monies have been all kinds of things throughout history. It's been cattle. It's been certain types of rocks. It's been even slaves. I mean, they have functioned as a common medium of exchange. And some of these are simply very costly and very, very cumbersome to use, right? So, and in history, a lot of Western societies ended up using gold and silver because that was very, very useful. I mean, it was very easy to use as well, and everybody agreed on it too. Right. So we basically had a world currency, and Bitcoin is sort of it's easier to travel with. It doesn't bother you in your pocket, so to speak, right? So it could definitely become a money in that sense.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is another topic I wanted to bring up with you, and that is, the only reason why I fell into Bitcoin and the ideas around Bitcoin was because I was already a sound money, hard money, gold bug type guy. I loved gold and silver. I still do, and I own a lot. I'm not gonna tell you how much I own, but I own it. And but I think the thing that attracted me to Bitcoin was, as much as a gold standard is great and should be celebrated, because you can't just create it willy-nilly. You actually have to spend time, labor, energy, and resources to pull it out of the ground, making it a fair form of money, because not just one person can just push a button. But when it comes to Bitcoin, you can actually audit it, and the records are there for everybody to see. The code that makes it up, any developer can go through it and look through it, and so it's almost like it's harder for it to be I guess, taken and twisted as far as how it's used. Because with the gold standard, governments can accumulate it. We can go back to the gold standard whenever the system falls apart. But then at the same time, like, they can lie to us again about how much they actually have related to the paper dollars that are in existence, and then therefore find ourselves in another 1971 situation where Nixon takes us off the gold standard because people were calling our bluffs as far as how much gold we actually had. And so you had nation states trying to redeem their dollars for getting their gold back. So it's a little bit more transparent. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a benefit for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if it, like you basically said, if everything comes crashing down, what will people turn to? Well, they will probably turn back to gold and silver, and they will use cryptos and things like that. But then they will see a real value in actually tracking how much money is there, and who has the real money, and who is just full of it.
Right.
I mean, who's just lying. Because people don't really know how money works today. But when you get a mortgage to buy a new house, it's not that the bank has collected this money from savers and then they give you the mortgage. No, they tap a few buttons on the computer and then they create the money in your account and then they transfer it to the seller of the property. Right? So it's completely new money. It comes out of nowhere. So what have you actually done? Well, you're in debt and the seller of the house has more money, but that new money, it's new money. It comes from nowhere. So it's no one who has actually said, it's just a dilution of everybody else's money. That's what's going on here.
Right. Yeah. No, those are all valid points. And we're getting ready to go to break here. But if you're curious about this and you want to learn more, you can go to my website, mattjmoore.com. I got a lot of resources. I even have a book called Foundations for Liberty where I talk about the monetary system. It's very good read. And our guest actually has a book here, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But stick around because we got more with Per Bylund.
Yep, stick around. We'll talk about those books. And Matt's website again is Matt J. Moore with 2 O's. mattjmoore.com. We'll be back with more of Matt J. Moore and cryptocurrency. Stick with us. You're listening to 102.3 KRMG, Tulsa's News and Talk. Welcome back to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. We are talking about economics, but more importantly, economics as they apply to the modern world. Where does cryptocurrency fall on that scale, and what is going to be its impact moving forward? One of the interesting topics we have covered today, and let's keep the conversation going. Here is our host, Matthew J. Moore.
Hey. Thanks for the introduction, Russell. We are here every Sunday, 5 o'clock here in Tulsa on Tulsa time. And yes, this is one of the only radio shows in the United States that's dedicated to cryptocurrencies. And we always have some unique and fascinating conversations. And in studio with me to help talk about these subjects and maybe add a little bit of comic relief is my co-host, Eric Cooper.
Got a face for radio, don't I?
I wouldn't say that. I still think you're a good-looking guy. But, here's where I want to kick it off. We have got a wonderful guest in studio. And, Eric, can you introduce our guest?
Yes, once again, we've got Per Bylund, and he is an associate professor at Oklahoma State and senior fellow at the Mises Institute, an author, and he's got a little book.
Yeah, I
Matt,
want him to talk about it.
Yeah, Matt. So you've written this book, and it's called The Seen, the Unseen, and the Unrealized. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Absolutely. I mean, the book really has one purpose. It has the purpose of trying to explain what regulations do.
Right.
And what the actual impact on the economy is. So in the book, you follow a little society, and I explain how economic growth happens, economic development, how different careers and specializations happen, and so forth. And then I add regulations to that, because a regulation is a restriction. It's a restriction imposed on the economy. So certain actions you can't take anymore. That's what a regulation is, right? So in this little dynamic economy with entrepreneurship, if you impose any kind of regulation, it means entrepreneurs can't go there. And entrepreneurs try to make money, more profit, and profit means that they have benefited consumers.
Right.
So the more consumers benefit, the higher price they're willing to pay, and the more profit there is potentially for you as an entrepreneur. So if you add one regulation, it means entrepreneurs might not be able to pursue that opportunity that would benefit consumers most. Instead, they would have to choose something else.
Right.
And therefore, we would be on a lower trajectory overall toward prosperity and well-being. So I explain in this book how this works and the actual effects of regulations, which are much, much greater in magnitude than when economists usually calculate the cost of regulation. They look at it, what are things like right now and what are the immediate effects. What I do in the book is I explain the long-term consequences, how we're put on a lower trajectory and what that means for us in the long term.
Right. Well, and we're going to dive a little bit more into that before we finish out the show. But I think it's important to make known that this show is made possible by our wonderful sponsors. And this segment is actually sponsored by and made possible by our wonderful sponsor, Bubble Up Car Wash. Yes, summer is here. And in Oklahoma, that means it's the perfect opportunity to show off your whip. And for all those people who don't know what that means means automobile. That's why this segment is brought to you by Bubble Up Car Wash in Broken Arrow off of 470 East Kenosha Street. They are Broken Arrow's newest locally owned car wash with all the bells and whistles to make your car clean, shiny, and dry. Whether you're looking to rinse off some of that mud or shine those 20-inch rims on that Impala, go take advantage of their free towels, vacuums, and air wands. They have unlimited wash plans starting at $19.99 a month, and you can add family members for $15 a month per vehicle. So what are you waiting for? Go cheer up at Bubble Up, and who knows, you might catch a glimpse of their family dog, Bentley, the Bubble Up pup. Check them out at mybubblup.com. All right. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt the conversation, but we are entrepreneurs here, and we are trying to keep this program on the air. So very, very appropriate. But I do wanted to talk, on the show, we talk a lot about regulations, and we talk a lot about the impacts of it. We talked about it, about how it relates to Bitcoin, some of the stuff that's coming out about Bitcoin. But in your opinion, Per, when it comes to regulations, when you have people trying to regulate or essentially control an economy or a monetary system, what do you have to say about the efforts that maybe governments and central banks use to try to predict and control outcomes? Because I think you made a point in one of the interviews that I was listening to about how they set the regulations and then, they kind of measure the effects of that. But then there's also these unseen or unrealized effects that people don't really measure or take into account. Is that true?
Yeah, those are the long-term effects. And the lower trajectory that I mentioned, that's basically it, right? So one regulation, it doesn't stop one entrepreneur just now. It stops any entrepreneur to enter that space forever, for at least for as long as regulation is in force. So it's going to be this sort of black hole that is no one can go there or use anything that has anything to do with it either. Right. And very often, innovations build off of innovations.
Right.
So if they can't go in that direction, they will go in another direction, which is of lower value, of course. But they also cannot produce those innovations that would come out of whatever they would have done in that space. So all this cumulative effect is sort of gone because we're on this lower trajectory. And that's terrible. Right. And when you mention the central bank, the problem here is that we're talking about money.
Right.
And in a market economy, money is one side of every transaction.
Right.
If you screw up money, you screw up every transaction.
Right. Which brings me to my question that I wanted to ask you. We got maybe a minute and a half left. Is it possible to have a free market if the monetary system is trying to be planned and controlled by a central bank, having these effects, if every part of transaction is money?
Well, the short answer is no.
Right.
So if you screw up the medium of exchange, then you screw up every transaction. And if you force people to use a certain medium of exchange, their valuation is going to be different as well. Right?
Right.
We buy something because we value it higher than what we give up to get it. Right? That's how we trade, how we exchange. So if the money is screwed up and it's valued in a very different way, or if they dilute it, as we talked about before, then consumers' valuations of goods are also going to change because they're looking at the goods themselves, comparing the goods and in money terms, and the money is fluctuating because someone is distorting it, then that's going to be very problematic.
Right. Well, if Eric Cooper wanted to read your book, where would he go?
Well, he would probably go to Amazon.com. It's available online from all kinds of bookstores.
I'm there often.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been a wonderful show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We do this every Sunday at 5. So if you want more cryptocurrency, more Bitcoin, more blockchain technology, this is the spot for you.
And we are glad that you took some time to join us this evening. Our guest again was Per Bylund, Perbylund. The book is called The Seen, The Unseen, and The Unrealized. And you can find that on Amazon. Thanks for tuning in. We will be here next Sunday for more Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. I'm Russell Mills. We'll see you then.